Sometimes it is not a trophy, not a goal, not even a record that makes a footballer immortal in the minds of millions. Sometimes it is one single movement, a trick so unique and so devastating that defenders are left paralyzed, fans are left screaming in disbelief, and children on playgrounds around the world begin to imitate it endlessly until that trick becomes a universal language of football. It was 1974, the World Cup in West Germany. The Dutch team, led by Johan Cruyff, had already stunned the world with their concept of total football. But one moment, one movement, changed football forever. Cruyff stood near the sideline, a Swedish defender tight on his back. The world expected a cross. The defender braced his body, ready to block, convinced he had forced Cruyff into a corner. And then Cruyff did something no one in world football had seen before. With one fluid drag of his right foot, he pulled the ball behind his standing leg, spinning away into open space. The defender was left lunging at shadows. The crowd gasped. And in that instant, the Cruyff turn was born. It was not just a trick, it was a declaration that football could be poetry, that creativity could destroy order, that a single move could shift the psychology of the game. For the defender, it was humiliation. For Cruyff, it was liberation. For football, it was a revolution. Psychologists call this the aha effect, the sudden shock of recognition when expectations are broken. The defender expected one thing, and his brain prepared his body for it. Cruyff shattered that expectation, leaving him helpless. That is why the trick was unstoppable. It didn't just beat the legs, it beat the mind. The Cruyff turn is now taught to children in academies around the world, but at its birth it was pure genius, pure improvisation. And it turned Johan Cruyff into more than a footballer. It turned him into a football philosopher. A trick is never just a technical execution. It is identity. It is psychology. It is the moment when a player steps beyond being simply an athlete and becomes an icon. When you watch the footage decades later, the goal may fade, the opponent may be forgotten, but that move, the one that rewrote the rules of the game, still feels timeless. It becomes art, it becomes culture, it becomes part of football's memory. Fast forward to the 1980s. Diego Armando Maradona, short, stocky, magnetic. The ball seemed glued to his feet, defenders terrified every time he touched it. His signature move was the roulette, the 360-degree spin. He would plant his body between ball and opponent, roll it with one foot, pivot, and in one breathtaking movement he would be gone. For defenders, it was psychological destruction. You thought you had him trapped, you thought you had his back to goal, and then, in a single blur, he was already past you, accelerating into open space. Maradona's spin was not about elegance, it was about survival. He grew up in the streets of Buenos Aires, where every touch had to protect the ball, every move had to shield from chaos. The spin was born in the dust of the barrios, a weapon forged in necessity. On the world stage, though, it was art. Defenders collided into each other, crowds roared, commentators screamed. The spin was unstoppable because it wasn't just a trick. It was an extension of Maradona's personality, defiant, untamed, unstoppable. Psychologists call this controlled chaos. Maradona seemed wild, reckless, impossible to contain, but within that chaos was perfect control, rhythm, balance. The spin embodied his genius, messy on the surface, brilliant underneath. Every child who tried the spin could feel a little of Maradona's power. Every defender who faced it carried the scar of humiliation, and Maradona became an icon, not only for his goals, but for the trick that no one could stop. In the 2000s, a new magician emerged. Ronaldinho Gaucho, with his eternal smile, played football like it was carnival. Every touch was a dance, every dribble a performance. His signature trick, the elastico. One whip of the right foot, ball pushed inside, then instantly snapped outside. Defenders collapsed, fans gasped, stadiums erupted. The elastico was not just speed, it was deception. The human eye is trained to follow patterns. If the ball goes inside, the brain prepares the body for inside. But Ronaldinho reversed reality in a split second. The brain lagged behind, the defender fell, and Ronaldinho was gone. He used it everywhere, in friendlies, in Champions League nights, against the best defenders in the world, and it always worked. The crowd celebrated it like a goal, because it wasn't just effectiveness, it was magic. Ronaldinho didn't just beat defenders, he embarrassed them. He made football joyful, unpredictable, unforgettable. Psychologists describe the Elastico as a perfect example of illusionary bias. The mind believes what it sees, even if it's false. Ronaldinho exploited that gap, turning defenders into victims of their own perception. The Elastico was more than a trick. It was Ronaldinho's signature. His smile made movement, and it turned him into a global icon, a player who redefined the word entertainment in football. The Cruyff turn, the Maradona spin, the Ronaldinho Elastico, 3 different moves, 3 different players, 3 different eras. But they share one truth. They weren't just physical actions, they were psychological weapons.
They froze defenders by breaking expectations. They inspired fans by creating moments of wonder. They gave children identity, a move to copy, a dream to chase. And they turned footballers into icons. Because football is not only about winning, it is about remembering. And we remember the trick that nobody could stop. Football, like any art, does not stay still. It evolves, transforms, reinvents itself through generations. And every era has given birth to a trick so influential, so devastating, that it becomes a permanent scar on defenders and a permanent symbol in the culture of the sport. In this part, we move beyond Cruyff, beyond Maradona, beyond Ronaldinho, and we look at the players whose tricks not only defined their careers, but also embodied their personalities, and in doing so created myths that no statistics can capture. When you think of Zinedine Zidane, you see elegance, grace, control, and a presence that felt almost regal on the pitch. And yet the trick that carried his name was brutal in its effectiveness, because the roulette, the spin, was not a show for the cameras, but a weapon designed to escape impossible pressure. A defender closes from the front, another hunts from behind, and just when it looks like Zidane is trapped, he rolls the ball under his sole, pirouettes, shields, and emerges with the ball still at his feet, the crowd erupting as if a miracle had happened. The brilliance of Zidane's roulette was that it fused body strength with mental composure, because unlike Maradona's raw chaos, Zidane's spin carried a sense of calm inevitability, as if he knew 10 seconds before the defender that escape was already guaranteed. Psychologists might call this anticipatory dominance, the ability to convince your opponent that resistance is useless, not because of speed or power, but because of certainty, and that certainty made Zidane's trick unstoppable, even against the greatest defenders of his time. Cristiano Ronaldo was not just about power, not just about goals, not just about jumping higher or running faster, because one of his most devastating weapons was deceptively simple: the Ronaldo chop, a move where he sprinted at full pace, then suddenly sliced the ball diagonally across his body, leaving defenders sliding into open space while he accelerated into the opposite channel. In the Premier League, where defenders were quick, strong, ruthless, this trick became his escape route and his dagger, because the chop turned a sprint duel into a moment of hesitation, and in that hesitation, defenders died. The psychology of the chop lies in momentum interruption. The human brain prepares for a linear duel, but when Ronaldo cut across his own running line, the defender's body and balance collapsed, because it was impossible to stop both the ball and the man when both changed rhythm in opposite directions. The Ronaldo chop was replicated by children in cages, by amateurs on dusty pitches, by pros in training, because it was simple to learn but impossible to master at the speed and precision Ronaldo delivered. And that simplicity turned it into a universal trick, a global language of football, and another reason why Cristiano became a legend.
Lionel Messi never needed stepovers, never needed fireworks, because his most devastating trick was the opposite of movement. It was stillness, the la pausa, the tiny pause in his dribble where he seemed to freeze time itself, forcing defenders to collapse under the weight of anticipation before he accelerated past them with inhuman sharpness. You can watch the replays endlessly. Messi charges towards the box, defenders panic and dive in, and just as they prepare their tackle, Messi hesitates for a fraction. Their legs commit, and then he bursts past into the space they abandoned. La Pausa was not speed, not power, not flair. It was psychology weaponized, because it exploited the defender's own fear, the fear of being left behind, the fear of hesitation, the fear of Messi, and in that fear they destroyed themselves. Psychologists describe this as induced anticipation, where the opponent's brain is tricked into acting too soon, and Messi perfected it to the point where entire teams, even elite defenses, collapsed, not because he outran them, but because he outthought them. And that made La Pausa not just a trick, but an eternal symbol of his genius. If Messi's trick was silence, Neymar's was noise, because the rainbow flick, scooping the ball with one foot and flicking it over the defender's head with the other, was outrageous, audacious, humiliating, and yet it turned him into a global icon of flair, because it embodied his spirit, fearless, joyful, rebellious. Crowds erupted, opponents fumed, referees sometimes even whistled it as unsporting, but the truth was simple. When Neymar pulled the rainbow, defenders froze, because to jump with him meant to risk ridicule, and to hesitate meant to concede space. The psychology here is ego confrontation. The rainbow was not just a technical move, it was a direct assault on pride, because no defender wanted to be the one with the ball flying over his head. But in that hesitation, Neymar always gained control. Even if it did not always create goals, it created fear, and fear is the deadliest weapon of all. And that is why Neymar's rainbow became his icon, a trick as controversial as it was beautiful.
Zidane's roulette, Ronaldo's chop, Messi's pause, Neymar's rainbow, all different, all unique, yet all unstoppable, and the reason lies not in the legs but in the mind. Each trick exploited a psychological gap. Zidane crushed pressure with certainty, Ronaldo destroyed balance with interruption, Messi broke anticipation with silence, Neymar shattered pride with humiliation. Football is played with the body, but won with the brain, and these tricks were not just skill moves, they were mental traps, invisible cages that defenders walked into willingly, unaware that the move had already beaten them before it even began. That is why these tricks endure, why they are imitated, why they are remembered, not just because they worked, but because they carried meaning, because they told stories, because they made football unforgettable. Every generation of football produces a new interpretation of the unstoppable trick, and while the foundations were laid by Cruyff, Maradona, Ronaldinho, Zidane, Ronaldo, Messi, and Neymar, other legends added their own unique weapons, subtle but devastating, and these moves too became impossible to stop, because they were built not on physical dominance, but on psychological manipulation. Everyone in the stadium knew what would happen. Robben would cut inside from the right wing, shift the ball onto his left foot, and aim for the far corner. And yet, even with that knowledge, even with years of preparation, defenders and goalkeepers were powerless to stop it. The psychology here is fascinating, because it was predictable inevitability. The defender's brain screamed that it was coming, but his body could not close the angle quickly enough, and his doubt created the smallest fraction of hesitation, and that fraction was enough for Robben to unleash his deadly shot. Mohamed Salah's trick is less dramatic but equally psychological. A faint drop of the shoulder, a small lean of the body, and defenders shift weight too soon, opening the lane for his acceleration. It is the psychology of micro-deception, where the smallest cues manipulate the defender's balance, making him collapse into the wrong decision before he even realizes it. Kaká, in his prime, didn't need stepovers or spins, because his unstoppable trick was his stride itself. Long, elegant, powerful, hypnotic. Defenders panicked because they expected complexity, but Kaká beat them with simplicity, and that simplicity was psychological brilliance because it stripped away disguise and left them with nothing to react to except inevitability. Mbappe's trick is acceleration itself, the sudden burst from stillness to sprint that leaves defenders gasping in disbelief.
It is not just speed, it is the timing of speed, because he waits until the defender relaxes, until concentration drops, and then he detonates like a bomb, and no human body can adjust in time. The psychology is delayed fear. Defenders know the sprint is coming, but they never know exactly when, and that uncertainty kills them. Before all of them, in Brazil, there was Garrincha, whose trick was the eternal body feint, the shimmy that sent defenders one way while he went the other, repeated again and again until even the strongest collapsed in confusion. His move was not elegant, not polished, but it carried pure psychological torment, because repetition itself became the weapon. Defenders knew it would happen, and still they fell, broken by the simplicity of a trick they could not solve. A goal can crown a match, but a trick can crown a career. That is why children in cages in Rio, streets in Lagos, alleys in Paris, and fields in Cairo all practice these moves, because to master the trick is to feel, even for a second, what it means to be an icon. Every unstoppable trick has 3 layers. First, it breaks the opponent's body. Second, it breaks his mind. Third, it gives fans a story they never forget. That is why the Cruyff turn is still alive, why Maradona's spin is still copied, why Ronaldinho's elastico still excites, why Zidane's roulette still shines, why Ronaldo's chop still kills, why Messi's pause still deceives, why Neymar's rainbow still provokes, why Robben's cut inside still echoes, why Salah's shoulder still tricks, why Kaká's stride still inspires, why Mbappe's burst terrifies, why Garrincha's feint still dances. Because tricks are not tricks. They are memories, they are symbols, they are immortality disguised as movement. Which of these tricks shocked you the most, and which forgotten move deserves to be called unstoppable? Tell us in the comments, and we will pin the sharpest analysis. And if you want more hidden psychology of football, give this video a like and subscribe to Kicksplosion TV, because the game is not only about goals, it is about the moves that make players immortal.